or period of existence, and in Scripture it often denotes a long space of time. Act 3. 21. 15. 18, including an endless period of time, that is, forever, eternity. Mr. 3. 29. 11. 14. Heb 13. 8 for these senses, see age. Here, however, we consider the sense of the term dealt with in the latter part of the definition quoted in the preceding paragraph. As an aid in understanding this sense, we may recall certain uses of the terms age, era, and epoch in English. We may speak of an age, era, or epoch in the sense of a period of time in history characterized by distinctive development or course of events, or distinguished by some prominent figure or typical feature or features. We may speak of the age of exploration, referring to the time of Columbus, Magellan, Cook, and other maritime explorers, or to the feudal age, the Dark Ages, the Victorian era, or, more recently, the Space Age. In each case what is prominent is not so much the time period itself but the distinguishing or characteristico textui acute miritra longo systems of things 1055 will of our God and Father. Many translations here render I middle dot on as age, but it is evident that Christ's ransom sacrifice did not serve to deliver Christians from on age or space of time, for they continued living in the same age as the rest of mankind. However, they were delivered from the state or system of things existing during that time period and characterizing it. Compare till 2. 11-14. The Apostle wrote to the Christians at Rome. Quit being fashioned after this system of things, but be transformed by making your mind over. Row 12. 2. It was not the time period itself that set the fashion, pattern, or model for people of that time, but it was the standards, practices, manners, customs, ways, outlook, styles, and other features characterizing that time period. At Ephesians 2. 1, 2 the Apostle speaks of those to whom he writes as having been dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you at one time walked according to the system of things following the way, J.B. Following the course, RS of this world. In commenting on this text, the Expositor's Greek Testament Volume 3, p. 283 shows that time is not the sole or prime factor here expressed by I middle dot on. In support of the rendering of I middle dot on by course, it says, that word conveys the three ideas of tenor, development, and limited continuance. This course of the world which is evil is itself evil, and to live in accordance with it is to live in trespasses and sins. Edited by W. Nicole, 1967. Ages, states, systems of things. There are various systems of things, or prevailing states of affairs, that have existed or will exist. Those brought about by God through his Son are, obviously, righteous systems of things. For example, by means of the law covenant God introduced what some might call the Israelite or Jewish epoch. However, here again what distinguished this period of history as regards God's relations with mankind was the state of affairs and the characteristic features brought about by the law covenant. Those features included a priesthood, a system of sacrifices and dietary regulations as well as of tabernacle and temple worship with festivals and Sabbaths, all of which formed prophetic types and shadows. And also a national system that came to involve a human king. However, when God foretold a new covenant J 31. 31-34, the old covenant became in a sense obsolete, even though God permitted it to continue in operation for a period of centuries thereafter. Heb 8. 13 Then, in 33 CE God brought the law covenant to its end by his nailing it, in effect, to his Son's torture stake. Col 2. 13-17. Evidently for this reason, Hebrews 9. 26 says of Christ that he manifested himself once for all time at a conclusion of the systems of things to put sin away through the sacrifice of himself. Nevertheless, the distinguishing features of that age or epoch did not come to their complete end until 70 CE, when Jerusalem and its temple were destroyed and the Jewish people were scattered. This disaster, although the last Judean stronghold at Masada fell to the Romans 3 years later, or in 73 CE permanently ended the Jewish priesthood, sacrifices, and temple worship as prescribed in the law. It also ended the Jewish national arrangement as established by God. This is undoubtedly why the Apostle, many years after Christ's death, but prior to the Roman devastation of Jerusalem, could relate certain past Israelite history and say, "Now these things went on befalling them as examples, and they were written for a warning to us upon whom the ends of the systems of things have arrived." 1 Co 10. 11. Compare Mount 24. 3. 1 Pe 4. 7. By means of his ransom sacrifice and the new covenant that it validated, Jesus Christ was used by God to bring in a different system of things, one primarily involving the congregation of anointed Christians. Hajj 8. 7-13. This marked the opening of a new epoch, characterized o textoi acute miritra longo, systems of things 1056. The law covenant. It continued contemporaneously with the I-on of that covenant, and it endured beyond the end of the I-on, or state of affairs, that the law covenant had introduced. The worldly I-on evidently began sometime after the flood, when an unrighteous way of life developed, one characterized by sin and rebellion against God and his will. Hence, Paul could also speak of the God of this system of things as blinding the minds of unbelievers, an evident reference to Satan the devil. 2 Co 4. 4. Compare Job 12. 31. Primarily, Satan's dominion and influence have molded the worldly I-on and given it its distinctive features and spirit. Compare F2. 1, 2. Commenting on Romans 12. 2. The Expositor's Greek Testament Volume 2, p. 688 says, "Even apparent or superficial conformity to a system controlled by such a spirit, much more an actual accommodation to its ways, would be fatal to the Christian life." Such worldly I-on was to continue long after the Apostles' day. For example, at Matthew 13. 37-43, in explaining a parable, Jesus said that the field is the world chaosmos. The harvest is a conclusion of a system of things form of I-on. Therefore, just as the weeds are collected and burned with fire, so it will be in the conclusion of the system of things. Some translations, such as the King James Version, use world to translate both chaosmos and I-on in these verses. It is clear, however, that the farmer in the illustration does not burn up the field, representing the world, but only the weeds. Hence, what comes to an end, or concludes, is not the world chaosmos but the system of things I-on. George Campbell's translation renders these portions. The field is the world. The harvest is the conclusion of this state. So shall it be at the conclusion of this state. The Four Gospels, London, 1834. Jesus showed that the wheat represented true anointed Christians, genuine disciples, whereas the weeds represented imitation Christians. Thus, the conclusion of the system of things, here depicted as the harvest time, would not refer to the conclusion of the Jewish system of things, in this case, nor to the conclusion of the state in which wheat and weeds grew together undisturbed, but must refer to the end of the same system of things as later referred to by the Apostle, that is, the present system of things marked by satanic domination. 1 T6. 17. So, too, with the additional illustration given by Jesus regarding the dragnet and the separation of the fish, depicting how it will be in the conclusion of the system of things. The angels will go out and separate the wicked from among the righteous. Mount 13. 47-50. These expressions by Jesus were doubtless in the disciples' minds when sometime later they asked the question as to the sign of his presence and of the conclusion of the system of things. Mount 24. 3. Jesus promised to be with his disciples in their disciplining work right down to the conclusion of the system of things also must refer to the conclusion of the state of affairs resulting from domination by Satan. Mount 28. 19, 20. Other examples of texts where I-on refers to such wicked system of things include Luke 16. 8. 1 Corinthians 1. 20. 2. 6, 8. 3. 18. Ephesians 1. 21. The coming system of things. At Matthew 12. 32. Jesus is quoted as saying that anyone speaking against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven in this system of things nor in that to come. This might be read as a reference to the Jewish system of things and the then future system of things that Christ would bring in by means of the new covenant. However, the evidence indicates that he referred instead to the present wicked system of things and to a system of things that would be introduced at the conclusion of that wicked system of things. He referred to that same future state in promising that those living home and family o textoi acute miritra longo, Tobith 1057 he made the systems of things. The particular meaning of the Greek word I middle dot on in these two verses has been variously understood. One way to understand them is to view the Greek term as referring to the distinguishing or characteristic features of a time period. In Hebrews chapter 11, the inspired writer is discussing how, by faith, the men of old times had witness borne to them. Verses 2 then, in his succeeding words, he presents examples of faithful men in the pre-flood era, in the patriarchal epoch, and in the period of Israel's covenant relationship with God. During all these distinct periods, and by means of the developments caused, formed, and accomplished in them, God was working out his purpose to eliminate rebellion and provide the way for reconciliation with himself on the part of deserving humans by means of successive systems of things. So those men of old had to have, and did have, faith that the invisible God was indeed directing matters in an orderly manner. They believed that he was the unseen producer of the various systems of things and that the goal they sought, the fulfillment of the promise, was an absolute certainty in God's due time. In faith, they looked forward to the further outworking of God's purpose, which included the system of things produced by the new covenant based on Jesus' sacrifice. Heb 11. 39, 40. 12. 1, 18-28. Another way to understand the use of I middle dot on in Hebrews 1, 2 and 11. 3 is that it is an equivalent of the Greek term chaosmos in the sense of the world or universe, the totality of created things including the sun, moon, stars, and the earth itself. This view is evidently supported by the statement in Hebrews 11. 3 that what is beheld has come to be out of things that do not appear. This verse could also be taken as a reference to the Genesis creation account, which could logically precede Paul's references to Abel verses 4, Enoch vs 5, 6, and Noah verses 7. Thus, Paul may have been expanding upon his definition of faith by referring to the existence of the universe consisting of sun, moon, and stars as clear evidence that there is a creator. Compare 1. 20. In the Hebrew Scriptures, the Hebrew term chalid is similar in meaning to I-on, referring in some texts to life's duration. Job 11. 17. PS 39. 5. 89. 47, but in other cases the features of the time period appear to be the main thing signified, allowing for rendering its system of things. PS 17. 13, 14. 49. 1. Some translations use the word world to render this term in these latter texts, but this rendering more or less bypasses the sense implied, namely, that of continuing time. Tarnak Tara Middle.Nak. An enclave city of Manasseh in the territory of Issachar. Jos 17. 11. 1 ch 7. 29 that was assigned to the Kohathite Levites. Jos 21. 20, 25 under the command of Joshua, the Israelites defeated the king of Taanach. Jos 12. 7, 21 but the Manassites failed to drive out the Canaanites from this and other cities. Eventually, however, these Canaanites were put to forced labor. JG 1. 27, 28 in the time of Judge Barak the forces of Jabin the king of Hazor, led by his army chief Sisera, were defeated at Taanach. JG 5. 19 during Solomon's reign the city was in the district assigned to Baana, one of the 12 deputies in charge of supplying food for the royal table. 1 Kai 4. 7, 12 archaeological evidence from Taanach and the relief on a temple wall at Karnak indicate that the city was taken by Pharaoh Shishak when he invaded Palestine in the 5th year of the reign of Solomon's son and successor Rehoboam. 2 ch 12. 2-4. Taanach is identified with Tel Taranach, about 8 km 5 miles of Megiddo and on the south edge of the plain of Jezreel in Israel. The site occupied an important position on at least 2 trade routes, one leading to the plain of Akko and the other to the plain of Sharon. Tarnath is Hello Tara Middle. Nath Shiloh. A site on Ephraim's border. O textoi acute muritra longo, Tabil 1058 ras abatabit, about 5 kilometers 3 mi of the Jordan River and 10 kilometers 6 mi of Succoth. Abel Mahola apparently was W of the Jordan and is spoken of as by opposite, J. Tabath. See Abel Mahola. Tabil Tabi Middle. El Good is God. 1. Father of a man whom the kings of Israel and Syria intended to place on the throne in Jerusalem if they captured Judah's capital. The name of the son is not given. The incident occurred during the period when the reigns of Ahaz and Pekah overlapped between about 762 and 759 BCE. Issa 7. 5, 6. 2. Joint author of an Aramaic letter sent to Persian King Artaxerxes opposing the Jews' reconstruction work in Jerusalem and resulting in a halt of temple rebuilding. As 4. 7, 24. Taberitabi Middle. Ra burning, that is, a conflagration. Blaze. An Israelite encampment in the wilderness of Sinai, the precise location of which is unknown. On account of Israel's complaining there, God sent a fire that consumed some of the people at the extremity of the camp. But when Moses supplicated Jehovah, the blaze sank down or was extinguished. This incident gave rise to the name Taberah. U 11. 1-3. To 9. 22. Tabernacle. A transportable tent of worship used by Israel. At times also called the tent of meeting. X 39. 32, 40. See tent of meeting. In Hebrew it is called Mishmiddle. Residence. Dwelling. Tabernacle, Goel tent, and Mikmiddle. Sanctuary. In Greek it is referred to as Ske Middle. Ne, which means tent. Booth. Residence. Dwelling place. See holy place. The tabernacle was a central feature of Jehovah's arrangement for approach to him by the nation of Israel. It consisted of 2 compartments. Picture, Volume 1, p. 538. The first, the holy, contained a golden lampstand, the golden altar of incense, the table of showbread, and golden utensils. And the innermost compartment, the most holy, contained the Ark of the Covenant, surmounted by 2 golden cherubs. See Ark of the Covenant. Most holy. When inaugurated. The tabernacle, or tent of meeting called the Temple of Jehovah at 1:1. 9 and the house of Jehovah at 1:1. 24, was constructed in the wilderness at Mount Sinai in 1512 BCE. It was completely set up, with its furniture and utensils installed, on the first day of the first month, Abib or Nisan. X 40. The priesthood was installed at Jehovah's direction by the mediator Moses on that day, and the full installation services occupied 7 days. On the 8th day the priests began to carry out their official functions. The chaps 8, 9. See installation. Design. Jehovah had spoken to Moses in the mountain, giving him the complete pattern for the tabernacle, commanding him, "See that you make all things after their pattern that was shown to you in the mountain." It served in providing a shadow of the heavenly things and therefore had to be accurate to the least detail. Heb 8. 5. Jehovah inspired Bezalel and Oholiab, so that the work, which others including both men and women shared in, could be done perfectly, according to the instructions Moses gave. The result was, according to all that Jehovah had commanded Moses, that was the way the sons of Israel did all the service. X 39. 42. 35. 25, 26. 36. 1. For the materials were provided through voluntary contributions from the people. X 36. 3, 6, 7. Doubtless the gold, silver, and copper, as well as the yarns, fabrics, and skins, came as contributions largely from that which the Israelites had taken out of Egypt. X 12. 34-36. See sealskin. Acacia wood was available in the wilderness. See acacia. The calculations in this article are based on a cubit of 44.5 centimeters 17.5 inches. However, the long cubit of about 51.8 centimeters 20.4 inches may have been used. Compare 2ch3. 3. as 40. 5. Coverings and screens. The entire framework of the structure was covered first by a linen covering embroidered with colorful figures of cherubs. The covering was in 2 large sections of 5 cloths each. The sections O textoi acute muritra longo, tabernacle 1059 30 cubits 13.4 meters, 43.7 feet long and 10 cubits 4.5 meters, 14.6 feet in height. Compare X26. 16-18. It was also evidently 10 cubits in width. Compare X26. 22-24. The width may be figured as follows. The rear or W wall was constructed of 6 panel frames of 1 1/2 cubits each totaling 9 cubits and 2 panel frames called corner posts, which evidently were positioned so that each added 1/2 cubit to the inside dimension. The Jewish scholar Rashi 1042-1105 CE commenting on Exodus 26. 23, noted. All the 8 boards were set in a row, only that the entire width of these 2 the corner posts did not show in the interior of the tabernacle, but only a 1/2 cubit on the one side and a 1/2 cubit on the other side could be seen in the interior, thus making up the breadth to 10 cubits. The remaining cubit of one board and the remaining cubit of the other board came against the cubit thickness of the boards of the tabernacle on the north and the south sides, so that the outside should be even. Pentateuch with Targum and Kelos, Haftarah and Rashi's commentary, Exodus, translated by M. Rosenbaum and A. M. Silberman, p. 144. Italics by the translators. The most holy compartment was apparently a cube 10 cubits on a side. Even as the most holy of Solomon's temple built later was cubical, each dimension being 20 cubits 8.9 meters, 29.2 feet. 1 Chi 6. 20 The holy compartment was twice as long as it was wide. As to the length of the holy of the tabernacle, these points are significant. Each of the 2 sections of the linen covering was 20 cubits wide. X26. 1-5 Thus, one section 20 cubits would stretch from the entrance to the place where hooks joined it to the other section. The junction apparently was above the pillars supporting the curtain to the most holy. Then the other half of the covering 20 cubits served to cover the most holy 10 cubits and also the rear or W side of the tabernacle 10 cubits. Panel frames. The walls were of acacia wood, gold overlaid, evidently in the form of panel frames similar to window frames, instead of solid boards. X26. 15-18 This view seems to be logical, for 2 reasons. 1 Solid acacia boards of the size described would be unnecessarily heavy, and 2 The cherubs embroidered on the linen covering that went over the boards would be hidden except for those seen on the ceiling of the structure, inside. X26. 1 So it appears that each panel frame was constructed in such a way that the priests in the tabernacle could see the cherubs embroidered on the linen covering. Some modern scholars also hold the view that the panel frame construction rather than a solid board design was used. Thus, although the Hebrew word resh is rendered board in older versions, several modern translations render the word frame or panel frame. X26. 15-29, at J.B. Mo. N.W. R.S. There were 20 panel frames on the N side and 20 on the S side. X26. 18, 20 Each frame was 10 cubits 4.5 meters, 14.6 feet high and 1 1/2 cubits 67 centimeters. 26 inches wide and of unspecified depth. On the rear or W end there were 6 panel frames and at the back corners 2 frames called corner posts. X26. 22-24. In connection with the panel frames, the Bible mentions rings. The rings were no doubt fastened to the frames to accommodate the bars, 3 rows of which were passed through the rings to tie the structure together. Evidently the top and bottom rows consisted of 2 bars each, for only the bar at the center is described as running through from end to end. These bars were of wood overlaid with gold. X26. 26-29. Pillars and foundation. 5 pillars overlaid with gold were at the front, or entrance, and 4 such pillars supported the curtain dividing the holy from the most holy. X26. 32. 37. The foundation for the entire structure consisted of 100 pedestals that had sockets to receive tenons that were on the bottom. O text 2 meter longo. Tabitha 1060. The courtyard of the tabernacle, probably at the sides of the structure. 1 of 3. 3 also, booths may have been erected in the courtyard, so that some of those making communion offerings, along with their families, could eat the sacrifices there. Its location in Israel's camp. Diagram, Volume 1, p. 538. The tabernacle was the center of the camp of Israel. Nearest it were encamped the families of the tribe of Levi, the caretakers of the structure. On the E was the priestly family of Aaron, on the S the Kohathites, from which Aaron's family had been selected for the priesthood. X6. 18-20, on the W the Gershonites, and on the N the Merites. U3. 23, 29, 35, 38. Farther away were the other 12 tribes. Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun on the E. Reuben, Simeon, and Gad on the S. Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin on the W. and Dan, Asher, and Naphtali on the N. U2. 1-31. From any part of the camp the tabernacle could always be easily located, because of the cloud by day and the fire by night, which stood over the most holy, where the Ark of the Covenant was situated. X40. 36-38. How transported? In moving the tabernacle and its furniture and utensils, the priests covered the utensils of the holy place. And then the Kohathites carried the covered Ark of the Covenant, table of showbread, lampstand, and altars. They transported these things on their shoulders, walking. New 4. 4-15. 7. 9. The Gershonites, having 2 wagons, transported the tent cloths except the curtain to the most holy, which was placed over the ark. New 4. 5. The tabernacle coverings, courtyard hangings, screens, related tent cords, and certain service utensils. New 4. 24-26. 7. 7. The Merites, with 4 wagons, took care of the very heavy items, including the panel frames and the pillars, socket pedestals and related tent pins, and cords. New 4. 29-32. 7. 8. History. After Israel crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land, the tabernacle was set up at Gilgal. Jos 4. 19. It was relocated at Shiloh during the time of dividing the land. Jos 18. 1, where it remained for years. 1 3, 24 before being moved to Nob. 1-21. 1-6 later it was at Gibeon. 1 21. 29 When the Ark of the Covenant was moved to Zion by David, it had not been in the tabernacle for many years. But until the temple was built by Solomon, sacrifices were still offered at the tabernacle in Gibeon, it being called the Great High Place. 1 Kai 3. For after the construction of the temple, Solomon had the tabernacle brought up to Jerusalem and apparently stored there. 1 Kai 8. 4. 2 Ch 5. 5. Figurative use. The Apostle Paul throws light upon the pictorial significance of the tabernacle. In a context discussing the pattern made by the tabernacle and the services carried on therein, he speaks of Jesus Christ as a public servant of the holy place and of the true tent, which Jehovah put up, and not man. Heb 8. 2 Farther on he says, Christ came as a high priest of the good things that have come to pass, through the greater and more perfect tent not made with hands, that is, not of this creation. Heb 9. 11 The tent in the wilderness was an arrangement set up by God's command for approach to him in true worship, an arrangement for typical removal of sins. Being an illustration. Heb 9. 9. It would foreshadow the arrangement that God established in which the great high priest Jesus Christ could serve, appearing in heaven before his Father with the value of his sacrifice, which can actually remove sins. Heb 9. 24-26. See Temple. Through this arrangement faithful men can have real approach to God. Heb 4. 16 The heavenly sanctuary of the tent of the witness or tabernacle was seen by the Apostle John in vision. Re 15. 5. The Apostle Peter, being a spirit-begotten Son of God with the hope of heavenly life in association with Christ Jesus, spoke of his fleshly body as a tabernacle. It was a dwelling place, but was only temporary. O textoi acute miritra longo. Tadmor 1061 southern end of the Sea of Galilee and about 8 kilometers 5 meters of the city of Nazareth. Isolated from other mountains, Tabor rises abruptly from the valley of Jezreel to an altitude of about 562 meters 1,844 feet above sea level. From the WNW it looks like a truncated cone, and from this like the segment of a sphere. From its summit, a rather flat elliptic area about 0.4 kilometers 0.25 mi wide from end to S and twice as long from E to W, it affords a magnificent view in all directions. The impressive prominence of this mountain probably explains why the psalmist mentions Tabor and Mount Hermon together as outstanding examples of the Creator's majestic craftsmanship. PS 89. 12 Jehovah also used the striking massiveness of Tabor, standing alone in the valley of Jezreel, to illustrate the impressiveness of Nebuchadnezzar upon his entering Egypt with a mighty military force. Jah 46. 13, 18. Tabor was made particularly famous when Barak, at God's direction, assembled 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun against Sisera and his army, which included 900 chariots with iron scythes. At the given signal Barak and his forces hurried down the slopes of Tabor, and after Jehovah had thrown the Canaanites into confusion, the Israelites won a decisive victory over the fleeing forces of Sisera. JG 4. 4-16. Some years later Tabor witnessed the killing of Gideon's brothers by Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. JG 8. 18, 19. By the middle of the 8th century BCE the unfaithful priestly and regal houses of Israel were as a net spread over Tabor, possibly using that mountain W of the Jordan as a center for idolatry to snare the Israelites. Mizpah may have been so used of the Jordan. Ho 5. 1. The summit of Tabor provided a commanding position and a most suitable location for a fortified city. The ruins show that such a city flourished there before and after the 1st century CE. This fact gives reason to question the tradition that Tabor was the location of Jesus' transfiguration, for the accounts say that Jesus and his 3 companions were in the mountain by themselves, to themselves alone. Mount Hermon is more likely that lofty mountain, and it is near Caesarea Philippi at the headwaters of the Jordan, where Jesus had been shortly before the transfiguration. Mount 17. 1, 2. Mr. 8. 27. 9. 2. 2. One of the cities in the territory of Zebulun given to the Levitical sons of Merari. Today its location is unknown. 1 Ch 6. 1, 77. 3. The big tree of Tabor was presumably in Benjamin's territory. It was a landmark that Samuel referred to in his instructions to Saul after Saul's anointing, where he was to meet 3 men en route to Bethel. The site is unknown today. 1 So 10. 1-3. Mount Tabor rises abruptly from the valley of Jezreel to Brim and Tab middle. Monday Good is Rimmon the Assyrian storm god, father of Syrian king Ben-Hadad son of Hezion. 1 Chi 15. 18. Tadmor. A wilderness location where Solomon did building work sometime after 1017 BCE. 2 Ch 8. 1, 4. Tadmor is commonly identified with the city known to the Greeks and Romans as Palmyra. Its ruins lie in an oasis on the northern edge of the Syrian desert about 210 kilometers 130 mi of Damascus. A nearby village is still called Tudma by the Arabs. If correctly identified, Dahan 1062 with Palmyra, Tadmor may have served as a garrison city for defending the distant northern border of Solomon's kingdom and also as an important caravan stop. See Tamar No. 4. Dahan Tahan, Dahanites Tahan middle. Ites of belonging to Dahan. Dahan was the founder of an Ephraimic tribal family, the Dahanites. New 26. 35. It is not certain whether he is the same Dahan mentioned at 1 Chronicles 7. 25. Tahash Sealskin, the son of Abraham's brother Nahor by his concubine Rumah. GE 22. 23, 24. Tahath from a root meaning lower. Under. 1. The descendant of Ephraim through Shuthelah. 1 Ch 7. 20. 2. another Ephraimite, related to number 1. 1ch7. 20. 3. A Kohathite Levite, forefather of Samuel and Heman. 1ch6. 22, 24, 33, 37, 38. 4. A wilderness campsite of Israel. Its location is unknown. New 33. 26, 27. Tichimanite to Chamo. A designation for one of David's mighty men, Josheb-Shabbath. 2-23. 8 spelled Hakmonite at 1 Chronicles 11. 11. It indicates a descendant of Hakmoni. Tupan's Tupan . Also Tupanhas Tupan . Tahaphanhas to Hafeni . A city in Egypt regularly mentioned with other cities of northern Lower Egypt, such as Noth Memphis, on Heliopolis, and Pibeseth Burbastis. During the last years of the Judean kingdom, the prophet Jeremiah consistently warned his people against political alliances with Egypt, a reliance on Egypt for help against the rising power of Babylon. Noth Memphis, the Egyptian capital, and Tupanhas are spoken of as feeding on Judah and Jerusalem at the crown of the head as a result of the apostasy of the Jews. Any support from Egypt was doubtless obtained at a high cost to the royal leaders of Judah. But they would become ashamed of Egypt, even as they had become ashamed of Assyria. Ch2. 1, 2, 14-19, 36. Remnant flee there. Following the Babylonian conquest of Judah in 607 BCE and the subsequent assassination of Gedaliah, the remnant of Jews went down to Egypt, taking the prophet Jeremiah with them. The first place mentioned at which they arrived or settled in Egypt is Tupanhas. Ch43. 5-7. This would evidently locate Tupanhas in the eastern delta region, that is, the any corner of Lower Egypt. Some of the refugees settled in Tupanhas. Ch44. 1, 7, 8. On arrival at Tupanhas, Jeremiah enacted a prophetic scene directed by Jehovah, placing stones in the mortar of the terrace of bricks that is at the entrance of the house of Pharaoh in Tupanhas in the presence of the other Jews. Then he made the proclamation that Nebuchadnezzar would come and place his throne and extend his state tent right over those very stones. Ch43. 8-13. Compare 46. 13, 14. In faraway Babylon in the 27th year of the first exile, that is, 591 BCE, the prophet Ezekiel also foretold that Nebuchadnezzar would conquer Egypt, and in Tahaphanhas the day will actually grow dark, for Jehovah would there break the yoke bars in the pride of Egypt's strength. This statement and Ezekiel's reference to the dependent towns of Tupanhas indicate that the city was one of importance and size. Es 29. 19. 30. 1, 2, 10-18. Suggested origin of name. Some translators understand the name Tupanhas to mean in Egyptian the fortress of Pinhas, Pinhas being a general from the southern city of Thebes who overcame rebellious elements in the delta region of Egypt, apparently in the latter part of the 2nd millennium BCE. The Greek Septuagint renders Tupanhas as Daphnes, and it is generally believed that this name coincides with that of an important fortified city on Egypt's eastern border called Daphne by the Greek writers of the classical period. For this reason some geographers identify Tupanhas with Tel Daphne, nearly 50 km 30 mi SSW of Port Said and about 45 km 28 mi WSW of Pelusium, the suggested site of Sin. Tupans Tupi. Wife of the Egyptian pharaoh contemporary Textoi Acute Muritra Longo, Tamar 1063, the northern part of the Promised Land. The Lagardine edition of the Greek Septuagint says land of the Hittites toward Kadesh, a similar reading being used by some modern translations. JB, NE, RS. Talent. The largest of the Hebrew units of weight and of monetary value. X38. 29. 2 so 12. 30. 1 Chi 10. 10. 2 Chi 23. 33. 1 Ch 29. 7. 2 Ch 36. 3. As rate. 26 calculated on the basis of its equaling 60 minas or 3,000 shekels x 38. 25, 26. C mina, A talent weighed 34.2 kilograms 75.5 pounds AFD. 91.75 pounds T. 1101 Oz T. In modern values a talent of silver would be reckoned at $6,606. 00 and a talent of gold at $385,350. 00. Since a mina equaled 100 Greek drachmas in the 1st century CE, a talent of 60 minas weighed 20.4 kilograms 44.8 pounds AFD. 54.5 pounds T. 654 Oz T, less than in Hebrew scripture times. Accordingly, in modern values, a 1st century silver talent would be worth $3,924. 00, and a gold talent $228,900. 00. Reckoned according to the Greek standard, the symbolic hailstones weighing about 1 talent 20.4 kilograms. 44.8 pounds, as referred to at Revelation 16. 21, would be a devastating plague. Talithakumi telai middle dot thakumi. The Semitic expression used by Jesus Christ at the time he resurrected Jairus' daughter. It means, maiden, I say to you, get up. Mr. 5. 41. The transliterations of this expression vary in Greek manuscripts. While it is often referred to as Aramaic, at least the latter part of the phrase kumi could be either Hebrew or Aramaic, according to Vine's Expository Dictionary of Old and New Testament Words 1981, Volume 4, p. 109. Lexicographer Gesenius derives talitha from the Hebrew word for lamb talmidl.le. A Hebrew and English lexicon of the Old Testament, by Brown, Driver, and Briggs, 1980, p. 378. Almai Talmai. 1. Brother of Ahiman and Shishai, sons of Anak. New 13. 22. Jos 15. 14. JG 1. 10. See him in number 1. Some scholars think that the name Tamahu, found in a hieroglyphic inscription depicting a tall, light-complexioned man, is the Egyptian equivalent for Talmai. This Canaanite name also occurs in the Ras Shamra texts of the period of the Judges. 2. The son of Ammihud, king of Jeshurun. 2 Sa 13. 37. Almai's daughter Maacah bore Absalom to David. 2 Sa 3. 3. 1 Ch 3. 2. After having Amnon killed for violating his sister Tamar, Absalom fled to his grandfather Talmai. 2 Sa 13. 28, 29, 37, 38. Talmon Talmunde, head of a post-exilic Levitical family of gatekeepers. After having returned from Babylon with Zerubbabel, he and his brothers were chosen to live in Jerusalem. 1 Ch 9. 3, 17. Es 2. 42. Ne 7. 45. 11. 1, 19. 12. 25. Tamar palm tree. 1. Daughter-in-law of Jacob's son Judah. Tamar married Judah's first son, but Jehovah put her to death for his wickedness, leaving Tamar a widow. She was then given Onan, but Jehovah put him to death for failure to perform brother-in-law marriage, and Tamar still remained a childless widow. Judah procrastinated in giving her his third son. Tamar concealed her identity and disguised herself as a prostitute in order to get Judah himself to have relations with her, cleverly taking his seal ring, cord, and rod as security. When Judah learned that Tamar was pregnant, he at first commanded that she be burned after being stoned. Compare Jos 7. 15, 25. But on learning that through her maneuvering to get an heir he had become the father, Judah exclaimed, "She is more righteous than I am." In the difficult birth that followed, Tamar produced twins, Perez and Zerah. GE 38. 6-30 The Messianic lineage is traced through her son Perez. Ru 4. 12, 18-22. 1 Ch 2. 4. Mount 1. 3. 2. A beautiful daughter of King David and full sister of Absalom. 1 Ch 3. 9. 2 Sa 13. 1. Her oldest half-brother Amnon became infatuated with her and through craftiness succeeded in violating her, though she resisted him. Absalom consoled her, kept her in his house, and 2 years later avenged Tamar by having Amnon murdered. 2 Sa 13. 1-33. 3. Daughter o textoi acute miritra longo, Tamarisk 1064 city, one that is commonly identified with Palmyra. See Tadmor. Tamarisk Hebrew, Eshel. The tamarisk grows as a tree or shrub. Though its trunk is gnarled, the branches are often band-like, giving the tree a feathery appearance. The evergreen leaves are tiny, scale-like, and pressed close to the branches, so they lose very little moisture by transpiration, enabling the trees to live in desert regions and even on sand dunes. In spring the tree blossoms with spikes of tiny pink or white flowers, which give welcome color to otherwise barren regions. Salt-loving tamarisks will often grow very near the ocean and on salt marshes. Abundant tamarisks along the banks of the Jordan form jungle-like thickets that are the habitat of wild animals, and in Bible times they may have helped compose the proud thickets along the Jordan, where lions once found cover. Jah 49. 19. Zech 11. 3. Though the tamarisk is generally of relatively low height, one kind of tamarisk tree, Tamarixophylla, sometimes grows to a height of 18 meters, 60 feet. Abraham is recorded as having planted a tamarisk at Beersheba Ge 21. 33. King Saul sat in the shade of a tamarisk at Gibeah 1 Sa 22. 6. And his bones and those of his sons were buried under a large tamarisk tree in Jabesh Gilead. 1 Sa 31. 13. Compare 1 Ch 10. 12, where the Hebrew word for big tree middle is used. Dr. Joseph Weitz, a noted authority on reforestation in Israel, said, "The first tree Abraham put in the soil of Beersheba was a tamarisk. Following his lead, 4 years ago we put out 2 million in the same area." Abraham was right. The tamarisk is one of the few trees we have found that thrives in the south where yearly rainfall is less than 6 inches. The Reader's Digest, March 1954, p. 30. Another type of tamarisk, Tamarix manifera, when pierced by a scale insect, exudes drops of honey-like sap that are gathered and sold to pilgrims in some places as manna. This has no relation, however, to the manna provided for Israel in the wilderness, since such true manna was miraculously provided and gathered from the ground. Acts 16. 13-15. Tambourine. A percussion instrument used since patriarchal times. The Hebrew word tof has also been translated timbrel, tambour, and tabret. Ge 31. 27, kx, da, as all these renderings essentially are descriptive of the same instrument. A small hand drum of animal skin or parchment stretched on one or both sides of a wooden or metal frame, likely about 25 centimeters 10 inches in diameter. In view of its festive use, some models may have had pieces of metal, perhaps jingles, attached to the sides and could have been played like a modern tambourine. Other types probably had more the appearance and use of a tom-tom, being beaten with both hands. Although the tambourine is not mentioned in connection with temple worship, it was used by both men and women in praising Jehovah and on other joyful occasions such as feasts and weddings. 1 Sa 10. 5. 2 Sa 6. 5. PS 150. 4. Issa 5. 12 women especially would accompany themselves with tambourines in singing and dancing. X 15. 20. JG 11. 34. 1 Sa 18. 6. The tambourine is also associated with the prospective gladness of Israel when the time of her restoration would arrive. Jah 31. 4. Tammuz, O Tammuz. A deity over whom apostate Hebrew women in Jerusalem were seen weeping in the 6th year of the prophet Ezekiel's exile 612 BCE. As 8. 1, 3, 14. In Sumerian texts, Tammuz is called Dumuzi and is identified as the consort or lover of the fertility goddess Inanna by Babylonian Ishtar. It has been suggested that Tammuz was originally a king who was deified after his death. Sumerian texts believed to date from the 18th century BCE show that the kings of Sumer were identified with Dumuzi. Regarding the identification of Tammuz, D. Wokestein and S. N. Kramer, tamarisk trees are able to live in dry areas like Beersheba, where Abraham planted one, Tapah 1065 marked. There were quite a number of dying gods in ancient Sumer, but the best known is Dumuzi, the biblical Tammuz, whom the women of Jerusalem were still mourning in the days of the prophet Ezekiel. Originally, the god Dumuzi was a mortal Sumerian ruler, whose life and death had made a profound impression on the Sumerian thinkers and mythographers. Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, New York, 1983, p. 124. In addition, O. Argoni wrote, Dumuzi was originally a man, a king of Erech. The humanity of Dumuzi is, moreover, confirmed by the mythological passage in which he says to Inanna, I will lead you to the house of my God. This is not the way in which a god would speak. Journal of Semitic Studies, Volume 7, 1962, pages 150-152. Tammuz, 2 Tammuz. The postexilic name given to the fourth Jewish lunar month of the sacred calendar, but the 10th of the secular calendar. Thus, in the Targum of Jonathan the expression the 10th month of Genesis 8:5 is rendered the month Tammuz. Tammuz was the name of a Babylonian deity. As 8:14 the Bible record does not apply this name to the fourth month, but merely refers to the month by its numerical order. As 1:1 the name does appear, however, in the Jewish Mishnah Taranot 4:6 and other postexilic works. The use of the pagan name Tammuz as applying to the fourth month, as well as the use of the other postexilic names, may have been only a matter of convenience among the Jews. It should be remembered that they were then a subjugated people, obliged to deal with and report to the foreign powers dominating them, and in view of this it is no strange thing if they utilized the names of the months employed by these foreign powers. The Gregorian calendar used today has months named after the gods Janus and Mars, and the goddess Juno, as well as for Julius and Augustus Caesar, yet it continues to be used by Christians who are subject to the superior authorities. Row 13. 1. This month, Tammuz, corresponded to part of June and part of July and, therefore, came in the growing heat of summer. By now the grapevines were beginning to yield their first ripe fruit. New 13. 20. It was on the 9th day of this fourth month Tammuz that Nebuchadnezzar breached the walls of Jerusalem in 607 BCE after an 18-month siege. 2 Chi 25. 3, 4. J 39. 2. 52. 6, 7. During the 70 years of exile that followed, the Jews customarily fasted on the 9th day of the fourth month in memory of this blow against Jerusalem. Zakat. 19. However, following the second destruction of Jerusalem, in the year 70 CE the fast was observed on the 17th day of the fourth month, the day the walls of the temple were breached by Roman General Titus. There were no festivals appointed by Jehovah for this month. Den Humeth Tan Middle. Humeth from a root meaning comfort. The Netophathite father of Syria, a military leader of the Jews left in Jerusalem after the deportation to Babylon. 2 Chi 25. 23. J 40. 8. Tanner. A person skilled in the tanning profession, the craft of converting animal hides into leather that can then be used to make articles of various kinds. 2 Chi 1. 8. Mount 3. 4. Doubtless the tanning operation was performed in the past as it has been recently in the Middle East. In Onya 2-room tannery, housing tools and vats for preparing the hides. The basic process of preparing leather involved 1. Loosening the hair, usually with a lime solution. 2. Removing the hair, bits of flesh, and fat adhering to the hide. And 3. Tanning the hide with a liquor made from such things as the bark of sumac or of oak, or from other kinds of plants. Peter spent quite a few days in Joppa with a certain Simon, a tanner, whose house was by the sea. Act 9. 43. 10. 32. Taphath Tarfath, a daughter of King Solomon and wife of one of his 12 deputies. 1 Chi 4. 7, 11. Tapah Tapu Middle. Our apple tree. 1. One of Hebron's 4 sons and a descendant O Textoe Acute Muritra Longo, Ta 1066 refers to the Ephraimite city. Ephraim Ittapah is identified with Tel Sheikh Abu Zuraid, about 13 km 8 mi SSW of Shechem and just below the town of Yashuf. Ta. Sebit Yemen. Taralatara Middle Dotla. A Benjamite city, the location of which is today unknown. It is listed, however, with other cities situated in the mountainous region and of Jerusalem. Jos 18. 25-28. Tereatar Middle Dotria. A descendant of King Saul through Jonathan. Also called Taria. 1ch8. 33-35. 9. 39-41. Tarshish from a root meaning shatter. 1. One of Javan's 4 sons born after the flood. Ge 10. 4. 1ch1. 7. He is included among the 70 family heads from whom the nations were spread about in the earth. Ge 10. 32. As in the case of Javan's other sons, the name Tarshish came to apply to a people and a region. 2. A descendant of Benjamin and son of Bilhain. 1ch7. 6, 10. 3. One of 7 princely counselors of King Ahasuerus who considered the case of rebellious Queen Vashti. As 1. 12-15. 4. A region initially populated by offspring of Tarshish, a son of Javan and grandson of Japheth. There are some indications of the direction in which the descendants of Tarshish migrated during the centuries. 21. Also that Jehoshaphat's ships were designed to go to Tarshish and, when wrecked, did not retain strength to go to Tarshish. 2ch20. 36, 37. This would indicate that Ophir was not the only port of call of the Israelite ships of Tarshish, but that they also navigated Mediterranean waters. This, of course, poses a problem, since the launching site of at least some of these vessels is shown to have been Ezion-Geber on the Gulf of the Kaaba. 1 Chi 9. 26. For the ships to reach the Mediterranean Sea, they would either have to traverse a canal from the Red Sea to the Nile River and then into the Mediterranean, or else circumnavigate the continent of Africa. While it is by no means possible to determine now the details of navigational routes including canals available or employed in Solomon's and in Jehoshaphat's time, there is likewise no need to view the record of their maritime projects as unfeasible. In prophecy, Tarshish appears to have been a major market for the merchant city of Tyre, perhaps her source of greatest riches during part of her history. From ancient times Spain has had mines working the rich deposits of silver, iron, tin, and other metals found there. Compare J 10. 9. As 27. 3, 12. Thus Isaiah's prophetic pronouncement of Tyre's overthrow depicts the ships of Tarshish as howling upon reaching Kittime Cyprus, perhaps their last port of call on the eastern run, and receiving the news that the wealthy port of Tyre has been despoiled. Issa 23. 1, 10, 14. Other prophecies foretell God sending some of his people to Tarshish, there to proclaim his glory. Issa 66. 19, and of ships of Tarshish bringing Zion's sons from far away. Issa 60. 9. The kings of Tarshish and of the islands are to pay tribute to the one Jehovah designates as king. PS 72. 10. On the other hand, at Ezekiel 38. 13. The merchants of Tarshish are represented along with other trading peoples as expressing selfish interest in Gog of Magog's proposed plunder of Jehovah's gathered ones.